Attention passengers. This is your co-pilot speaking. Your pilot is black mind, so you are not going blind and there is no power failure. You are merely experiencing the immense blackness of his proximity, and when you hear his voice, you and the cabin will get even darker than you are currently. We will be cruising at the speed equal to light, because the one other thing that travels equally fast is darkness. Your loved ones awaiting your arrival may not recognize you at first sight. This is normal. Simply tell them about the pilot, and they will understand. We will taxi to the runway now, so please buckle up and prepare for a high-speed departure. Thank you for choosing Jet Black Airways, where the phrase jet black is also a verb. We hope you keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Justice forever.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. Hit the share button, because the message is more important than the messenger. So getting right to the title. First thing I need to tell you all is that there are many women with that name, Veena Vinod, in India and its diaspora. So if you try to find her, be sure not to send messages to some other woman with her name, because they didn't write this shuck fit, and the chances are actually very low that they will agree with her. The next thing is that we have to remember she probably didn't think any man would read it, or she thought it wouldn't matter. It's one of those two, and I'm going to let you guess and tell me which one is more likely. Do you think it's more likely, more probable, more realistic that she thought no man would ever see the answer, or that it wouldn't matter if we did? Now, if it's the second one, then this means that they have a lot of weapons in their society against men. And that's not all, it gets worse. The questioner was anonymous on Quora, and that's where this question was written about having someone else's baby, carrying someone else's baby while married to her husband, and the husband doesn't know it wasn't his. The questioner was anonymous, but I can only assume it was written by someone in India. And I can tell you that frankly, Veena is not only in Indian, but she is physically in India. So I'm saying un-Indian, A-N. She's not only of Indian extraction and nationality, but she's in India. I can tell based on what she wrote. What she wrote is worse than what we saw, though, because see, many of us saw a screenshot, and what I'm about to tell you was outside of the screenshot, but it was still in her reply. She also wrote, first of all, as a precaution, frame some false case against your husband so that if he plans to move legally, you can counter it with this: physical torture, mental torture, dowry harassment, and there are many more ways you can lock him from his activities. Contact any female lawyer and make sure she is a feminist so that she can help you more sincerely. End quote. That's not all darkness is. She openly makes an argument against men in another sentence before the post is over. This is the last thing she said in there. If he acts more smart, then go for a divorce and claim good alimony and maintenance so that he can't marry again with his financial capability. You can live happily with your child and your lover, or you can live just with your child. Being a feminist, I wish you all success for your fight against the men. End quote. And that's the end of her reply. She takes it there. Now, as I stated, we saw the shortest screenshot of the post, and the last thing that you saw on that was the line, "The law is there to support you." You might have seen the top of "frame a false case," and you didn't get to see the whole sentence there. But that, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, that hyena bitch wrote everything I just told you all. Since then, she changed her profile picture to Rosie the Riveter, and she dropped the last name Vinod, but it was her that wrote that reply. She didn't hide that she's a misandrist. She will say she's a feminist, but she sees men as the enemy. You just heard her say this in her last sentence. So I'm calling her a misandrist. Now, what many of you did not know was that the Indian woman, to a certain extent, is like the Western black woman. She acts a fool because she can. Now, I saw a man from India at the Kaaba in Mecca slap his wife in the mouth. They might not have been from India, but I think they were. But I saw him slap his wife. She was talking. I didn't know what they were saying, but there was nothing in her demeanor or her voice that explained why he reacted like he did. He hit her in the mouth. It wasn't hard. It did not hurt her physically. It silenced her. She seemed stunned and shocked. I don't agree with this sort of thing. But then again, I can't really interfere much because I don't know what she said. And there are things women can say just to test a man. And he didn't hurt her. What I can say is that I'm beginning to understand where Indian and Pakistani man, after man after man after man, get some of this rage and anger against women nowadays. I've met a few that seem to have some sense of frustration regarding women, and I get it now because, frankly, their women lie like a mother cuss word. I told you that the thing that makes many of us upset, and we never should apologize for this, is the lying and the deceit. And I'm saying that they're going through the exact same mother cuss word thing. Dudes are watching Bollywood movies. And that's not what the women are becoming. So when they express this frustration, it may sound pitiful to us because we think we're the masters of game and swag and that they're the least at it. But you know what? You can understand this cause now that you see what Veena Vinod said and you understand the reactions that she did and did not get. At a young age, they might be taught some patriarchy in terms of the culture itself, but then feminism comes in and counters it, much like what happens to us, and their women can't be satisfied. So the women slowly actually forget about that. The men actually slowly learn in stages that they cannot win in the eyes of their women. So their women see them as pitiful and pathetic no matter how much these guys achieve. Think about it. Vice President of the United States, an Indian, Jamaican, amongst other things. What about the Prime Minister of their former colonizer, the UK? CEOs of most of the major tech companies, not just in their country, but in the States as well. They actually, they are achievers. We have to admit that. We think they got all their stuff together, and we can't sit up and say that they do when we really look at what's going on with them right now. Just like for us, swag and dominating other men has become the means of maybe at least competing, not even necessarily succeeding, but at least competing for reproductive success. Well, they've been taught, at least that's what we thought. Turns out Brad ain't got to do none of that. Well, see, they've been taught that achieving is the means of competition for reproductive success, not necessarily even succeeding. And look what that's gotten them. They're overachievers, and yet and still, this attitude is always against them. No matter how much they achieve, their women view them the way that outsiders stereotype them. Now, I always knew that actually about subcontinental women. I knew that they view their men the same way that Western whites and even we sometimes stereotype their men. But when some of you shines in this black manosphere space with whom I'm cool and even share a group have said the usual line that only black American women view their counterpart men, us, through the lens of white supremacy, I knew that that was only true in America, not necessarily globally. And now we can see it somewhere else. See, Asian women from the outside of the subcontinent, meaning the Eastern Asian women, also view their men the same way when they're exposed to Western thinking. I'm going somewhere with this. I've seen Ethiopian women in the US, after a few years of living in Atlanta, take on a different attitude towards their men that they never had back home and didn't even know existed. They start seeing their men as having, back home, they see their men as having beaten the Italian army 2 times. 1892 at Adwa and again in the years preceding the Second World War. That's how they view them traditionally back home. But then they land in the United States, maybe Canada too, and they start to see their men as too docile and too nice, too welcoming of others, while they themselves are the same way to Forenja men. So they stop seeing their men as lions, not because of some military defeat, but because of Western materialism. Swag. They don't like the way their men dress and the way their men don't come off as aggressive compared to Western male mannerisms. Then they graduate to thinking their men don't have the right to any sort of male authority because of the material things they don't have and the ways they don't dress and the ways that they don't nigger swagger all over the damn place. Yeah, I said it, nigger swagger. And say something about that, and I'm going to say it with the hard R just to raise your blood pressure even more. And keep in mind, I haven't collected a dime from YouTube, so this gets demonetized, whoop-de-doo. We'll talk more about the money later, though. So this is a real phenomena in which the Indian woman has exceeded even the Ethiopian woman, the Chinese, the Korean woman, because frankly, the Indian woman has internalized this thinking even in their homeland before getting to Canada or the United States. A lot of us didn't realize this, or the UK. See why the Japanese or the Chinese or the Korean or the Ethiopian woman has to go to the West before thinking that their men are lesser men for dumb reasons. The Indian woman can live in India all of her life, eating their foods, speaking their language, and still somehow think that her men are lesser men before she ever gets to the airport in her country to leave it. I talked to a Hindu man a week after my relative accepted Islam last February, and that man said if his wife divorces him, her family won't harm him, but if he divorces his wife, they'll kill him. These are the men in the family ready to support that, just like y'all saw on that Indian TV show where the woman was abusing a man and she slapped the man, he slapped her, and all the men came to beat him up. How can you slap? How can you slap? They're already on this shore bit in some ways. Does that sound familiar? The irony is that frankly, this feminism made its way into India and Pakistan shortly after their independence from England, when the nations were trying to relearn how to be nations after centuries of British rule and interference. They were like Black Adam after he woke up and saw his homeland in today's time and said he had no home. That's because the world in which they had been independent from England didn't exist anymore, doesn't exist anymore. And a decade and some change into relearning this, they got feminism imported through the TV. Now, I'm sure that this had to happen in stages. I'm unsure when it became strong, but it was enough for my schoolmate back in Morehouse to have grown up under a feminist mom while his dad didn't understand what it was fully to even shield him from it. His mom has some of these unfair views too, as far back as his birth in the middle 70s. She had never left India as far as I know, and she didn't have to. She effectively castrated her son by the time he got to college, which was a year before I got there. And if that son hadn't gone to school with some of us shines in Morehouse and learned some of that pushback from me and a few others, he'd have remained castrated. And by the way, bruh, if you're listening, you recognize my voice, but please don't say my whole name online, and you're welcome. And whatever your marital status is now, just remember, she needs to prove her logical superiority to you and pay the cost to be the boss if she wants to run stuff. And you're probably already aware of this at this point. And I hope that you didn't marry a white Western broad or Western sister, because frankly, you should never have to deal with this stuff. And I hope your sister now knows not to hit your brother-in-law, no matter how angry she gets. So back to Veena Vinod. Let's look at what she showed us. And a lady named Disha Banerjee covered this reply of hers in an article. And frankly, through that article, I learned that even many feminists in India thought Veena was bat guano crazy. Despite the fact that I also learned that there's a documentary in India about men getting done wrong in the marriage and divorce courts. The documentary is called Martyrs of Marriage, and it was made by a man named Deepika Narayan Bharadwaj. And I'm probably mispronouncing the last name. He replied to Veena's reply in Quora and in Twitter and clarified for people who didn't know her that she is consistently like this. And this is not a joke. She's not trolling. This is not a fake. He has a friend that was a victim of paternity fraud. And when he found out and he left that B word, he left the bitch. She filed the false dowry case, which tells me that this is a real thing in India. And then she demanded an apartment from him, but he had to pay more to fight the bitch in court than the apartment would have cost him. However, now he owes her nothing after winning, and he's an attorney in India where he lives. This is the documentary maker's friend who was featured in the documentary. So from all of this, we learn the following. One, we learn that this is seen as excessive in India by their own standards, this misandry, this beyond feminism, but also it's still being promoted there. How do we know? Well, the second thing that this teaches us comes from the first, and that is that despite the outrage that provokes emotionally amongst men and women, that bitch Vinod still is safe posting mess like this, whereas the culture itself doesn't excuse it. This means that things are changing, and they're changing quickly. What do you think they're going to change towards? They're going to change from what they used to be, where a woman like Veena Vinod would get beat up by other women, to the opposite, where the hyena bitches abound over there and they silence women that don't mean any harm to men. Does that sound familiar? Because that's the direction in which they're moving. The third thing we learn is that, well, you know what? You can learn the third thing from asking a question about the first. If things are changing this quickly, then who the cuss word is changing it? Did I not tell you that these Western chicks are exporting not only ideas of women's rights, which makes sense on the surface, provided that they're balanced with men's rights and women's responsibilities, but they're exporting outright misandry? You think Veena Vinod got this on her own? No, bruh. Did I not tell you that they don't have to leave the West to do this? You think a misandrous, wicked witch of the West is going to go to India in person to preach this face to face to people the way that people stereotype India wrongly and correctly? No. This means that India is probably further gone than the average Western hyena misandrous bitch thinks that it is. They're more successful in India than what they think they are. They don't have to go there. Did I not tell you that the best way to prevent this is to take as buddies the men in the locations to which we're moving and share this information with them? Did I not tell you that we must be as proactive about inoculating the men as these wicked witches of the West are about what they call protecting the women over there, and really weaponizing them against the men they already hate for being not only men, but also darker and old-fashioned and probably poorer? See, when you export this misandry to women in these developing or undeveloped nations, something strange happens. And this is why the women are saying that when we go to these same nations, the women there are treating us good only because we're from the first world. They're saying this because this is how they react. When you export this misandry to these women, they still will try to make exceptions for men that have a lot. See, keep that in mind. And that's why it is that the Western woman assumes that women in these third world nations feel the same way the Western women feel. They just hide it because we got stuff to give them. That's what they're thinking. That also tells, that attitude, that assumption they make right there tells us that when ladies grow up in a safe society, that's what it takes for them to value men at all. That also tells you this. That intuitively, personally, and sexually, they're not capable of valuing men. So listen, let me tell you that there have been cases in which women have gone abroad with this effery and they failed. And we want these failures to continue to be the case, unlike in India where they seem to have succeeded even when they didn't go there. Base Muslim knows of some of these failures. My wife knows of a failure like this. We know of the one AA sister, the Ados hyena that went over to Ghana, and she found that she can't pull that stuff. She can't get a mob to go and turn against a man on her behalf. Yeah. But we want these failures to continue, and to do that, we got to be proactive. And to do that, we're going to have to be more willing to engage in local languages, or at least mixtures of these languages in English, with guys who are neither American nor black at all, as far as we'll know. We haven't really talked about how we're going to relate to these guys as buddies, and we're going to have to be on accord about this. Because not only can we not walk around trying to shut these guys out in their own jurisdictions, we can't walk around not chatting with them and schooling them either. See, it's good that we got passport bros doing what Austin and BMT are doing and networking. That is true. There's going to come a point where the Thai man over there is going to have to be included in these discussions. There's going to come a point where the Pinoy men, the Pinay men, the Filipino men are going to have to be included in the discussions. Because they got certain things a certain way right now, and that's good, and it has benefited us and them. But by the same token, they're going to have to keep these things that way, and that's where we come in. Did we ever think about this? Because see, if we fail to do this, you have to realize that the daughters you will have with these great wives and mothers in these areas will still learn that misandry with no counters to it. Because remember, the misandrists are not traveling over there to spread this stuff face to face very often. And your daughters will be probably fluent in English and their mother's language. And this will lead to them becoming the leaders in changing those nations if they can, because they will understand the message in English and be able to perfectly translate it, nuance and everything, into their mother's language, into the people's language. And we do not want a situation in which, while we are staying over there, so as to not bring mom to Canada, the UK stateside, and have her get ruined and have her raise our daughters that way. That's very true. But we're going to have a situation in which not only do we monitor the daughters' social media, absolutely, and punish them if we find out they got any account on any platform about which they did not tell us. But we're going to have to include the men in this as well. We're going to have to cover both of those bases. Then this way, the daughters are not recruited to become the leaders of the change in the areas to which we move. Because if I was a misandrist and I knew about passport bros and I had a logical mind like what I got, I would start saying, wait a minute, play the long game. Let them have daughters over there. We will reach out to those daughters in English. We don't even need Google Translate anymore. They will be the Google Translate. They'll be better than that, because they can translate the slang, the nuance, the jokes, the humor, everything. And this will become popular through their own daughters in these lands. If we are not careful, they'll do this. And don't say, Black Mind, you gave them the idea. No, one of them would have thought of it anyway. I'm giving you the idea before they get it. Look, more importantly, stop thinking that there's nothing to learn from someone else, even if we don't like them. Disliking someone because they don't like us means that there will be no alliance, unless, of course, we're both willing to admit that we don't like each other, but we're working for a common goal and we clearly define that alliance. And even then, we can't trust them like they can trust us. I understand that. But you can learn from a loved one as well as you can an enemy. Actually, you can learn from a loved one better, but you can still learn from an enemy, especially if they don't know you're learning. Whatever they cannot hide is what you learn. So I can tell you that on one hand, to leave a community alone because they're not shine friendly or melanin neutral, like what I tell you regarding the women from India and Pakistan and Afghanistan and Iran. Because of their people's, not just the women's, but the people's anti-black attitudes. And yet I can still tell you to learn from what you can see them experiencing. Both can be true at the same time. This is where nuance comes in. And as I've explained, nuance is kryptonite to the Negro. Stop it. Now, would I tell you to warn subcontinental men like I would tell you to warn men from the Philippines or a black Brazilian or a Thai man? Absolutely not. India and Pakistan are already under this grip of misandry, and their women are well on their way to becoming as rotten as any Western hyena, friend-zoning responsible men and choosing idness with whom to have their children and then have abortions if they don't want the shame of a child out of wedlock, plus trying to get every man's attention while they only think at best 15% of men are attractive and move towards all wanting the same man just like the Western woman. And then on top of that, with their sexual conservatism to shut out their own men. And not for reasons of chastity, they still have the audacity to have damn breeding parties with the colonizers. That's how far gone they are right now at this point. They're that gone. But you know what? Not only are these nations of potential enemies of our entire race already lost, but they're still fighting back on their own terms, from which we might learn by observing them without any alliance they wouldn't honor anyway. So other nations that are within the tropics that are not enemies to us still have a hope of escaping the fate of India and Pakistan, and we can help with that. And that's to a mutual benefit and interest. We're just going to have to pay more attention to this. It appears that there's less turbulence now, so you may unbuckle your seats and move about the cabin freely. From the bottom of my black heart and from the depth of my black mind, thank you again for listening and for choosing Jet Black Airways, where we turn the adjective jet black into a verb. Keep jetting black with us. As always, black heart, black mind, blackout, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual, non-select male power, just because Veena Vinod doesn't like it, and black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day. Prepare for arrival.